Right, so thank you very much. I'm aware we're a little over time, so we'll keep as close to time as we can, but if I hear the rumbling of any stomachs, I will bring it to a close as fast as I can. So, thank you. Welcome to the panel here. Going from your left, we've got Matt Hill, who is the Head of Research and Planning at Thinkbox. Next to him, we have Simon Cross, who is Solutions Director for Media at Ebiquity, and he's the author of the recent Ebiquity report, TV at the Tipping Point, which is where we're going to start in a minute. And next to Simon, we have Clare Peters, who is Head of Business Strategy at MGOMD, Media Agency of the Year, may I add.
Yeah.
Okay, so yes, well done, Clare. Okay, Simon, let's start with your TV at the Tipping Point report. And by the way, you can see Simon is wearing the plaster cast on his foot. This is not from putting the boot in TV, okay, although you might think that.
It's mostly metal now, isn't it?
Mostly,
yeah,
more metal
Matt,
than there is
really.
bone now.
So TV at the Tipping Point report came out in January, February.
Yeah,
it kind of threw a big rock into the pool, I would say. So do you just want to take us through in 60 seconds briefly what it says, the main points?
Yeah, sure. So it arose from us looking at forecasts for 2019 from 2018 data. And we started noticing that there were certain things that we'd seen before that we were used to seeing. So young audiences being on the decline slightly. But we were seeing other things that we hadn't seen before. So older audiences being on the decline as well. ABC One adults, housekeepers with children, all taking a downturn. So we took a step back and looked at a sort of a bigger picture in terms of the cost of building reach and what have you of those audiences, and subdividing those audiences into much smaller demographics and see what was happening. And we hadn't really noticed this, and it hadn't really been talked about in the industry much, certainly amongst our clients, that we had sort of 16 to 17-year-olds down 55%, 2018 on 2017. And, to a certain extent, that was mirrored up the age breaks. So knowing that TV is, by a stretch, the best medium in terms of ROI, percentage ROI, but also in terms of the scale of profit that you can generate. I mean, it's not even that close. So irrespective of which sector you look across, it's got a lead of about 40% on medium number 2. And that medium will vary by sector. So financial services, it might be paid search. In FMCG, it might be posters and so forth. But TV was hugely better than any other medium. So when we said, okay, well, if the supply is declining at this sort of rate, and it's a supply and demand equation, then it will inflate at the same sort of rate if revenue is about the same. And we'll get to the stage where that 40% is eroded. So we need to be saying to our clients, actually, there's a window where you need to be thinking about plan B. Because at the moment, TV drives everything in terms of profitability. And it won't be this year, and it probably won't be next, but over time it will happen. So that's really what TV at the Tipping Point does. It says that TV was different in 2018 than it was in 2017. And the trends are that at some point in a time horizon of, let's say, 5 years, it won't be that TV is the giant whose shoulders you can sit on anymore in terms of your brand profitability. There will be a much, much more complicated jigsaw that you're going to start thinking about now.
Okay, right. In the interest of balance, Matt, representing Thinkbox and therefore mainstream TV, if I can call it that, your refutation of that.
Yeah, so, I mean, I think probably should start from the point of we have a huge amount of respect for Ebiquity. We've done a lot of work with Ebiquity in the past, and we've had recent success at Mediatel Research Awards with the profitability piece of research that we did with Ebiquity. And I think the reality is, in terms of actually reading the report cover to cover, there wasn't anything in there that we, fundamentally absolutely disagreed with. We agreed with the sort of principal findings. I think the issue we had with it was I suppose the way in which it was written and what wasn't written about. And so it was a report that was largely about the future of TV and pretty much entirely ignored the fact that TV is changing and the way that we watch TV is transitioning from linear to broadcast to VOD. And especially for younger audiences, we're seeing 20% of viewing now sits outside of our sort of industry standard TV set viewing within 7 days. And so I felt that should have been brought more to the front in terms of the questions we have around that area and its role within the plan. And then I think the other issue really was the sort of, within our was the catastrophizing language that we felt that if advertisers just read the executive summary, they would come away with the viewpoint that the future of TV is pretty bleak, and that they do exactly what Ebiquity in the report say you shouldn't do, which is decrease your investment into TV. And I think that was the essence of our overall response.
This is the best mannered punch up I've seen. Simon was nodding along in agreement. He was wincing at when Matt referred to the language. So basically, if I got this right, I'm going to summarise this brutally. You're saying you didn't really take into account broadcast of VOD sufficiently. Okay, fine. Claire, you're sitting there on the outside of the ring, spending lots of your clients' money on TV.
Yes.
What are you thinking when you read this?
So I guess the agency reaction and probably the industry reaction is quite measured with all of this, because there are two very well balanced arguments here. One, which is obviously Simon's, and the other, which is Matt. So if you've read both in detail, you'll come away agreeing with both, actually. So I think the point that I want to make around this whole thing, and actually a lot of what I've listened to this morning, is my observation about us as human beings, as agencies, as clients, as people, is that we're not great at change. We're not great at the agility and being to adapt to that change. And I think your point about the plan B, I think broadly the conversation around TV, AV, however you want to term it, needs to fundamentally change and shift. And with that, many, many other things need to change and shift with it. And arguably they're not shifting and changing quick enough to allow that conversation to happen quick enough. So for us as an agency, there's some of the frustrations we're getting from our clients, and I put that with a capital F, is why can't you measure this stuff? Why can't you tell me about the impact on my business? And our clients, as we know, many sectors are under increasing business pressure. And the reality is short term, people that can answer that in the short term are winning out from the long-term conversations and arguments, despite the array of facts you've got about the power of these mediums. So that's a whole kind of bunch of stuff in there.
Right, okay. So but what are the things that, as agencies, I mean, you talk about the measurement. Is basically you're talking about measurement in the broadcast of VOD context? Is that right? So, in other words, it takes us straight into the Barb issue and Project Dovetail.
Yeah, I mean, it's been talked about a lot this morning, and attribution, but measurement, yes, is fundamentally an issue here. But I also think there are other fundamental reasons like auditing, which no one's actually mentioned this morning, but the way that agencies and TV is audited, you could argue, isn't shifting at the same rate. So, predominantly being based on coverage, when there's an argument that TV should be measured and thought about in a different way. So, but yes, the measurement piece is a massive sticking point for clients and agencies.
We'll come back to that. So, Simon, your responses to what you've just heard from Matt and Claire.
From the point of view of BVOD, I think we didn't perhaps say enough on BVOD, but then there's very, very little to say because there's so little data to show it. So when we looked at, for instance, the cost of generating 50-60% reach on linear TV, and the loss over time, say 5 years, was quite significant. So in other words, if you're an advertiser and you're being tasked to buy 60% reach on TV, which is one of TV's real selling points, there's a significant amount of extra money you need to do now and then. If you were going to channel that money into VOD, and this is Matt's point, perfectly legitimately, we would expect there to be some incremental cover, but we don't know what it is, and to an extent, it's very, very difficult for the likes of Clare to plan but say to the client, yes, absolutely, I can do this, I know how it is done. And if clients get frustrated, advertisers get frustrated when Clare comes forward with a proposal to do this, and okay, am I going to get my 60 back?
Yeah, okay. So if I've got this right, so then, I mean, would you... Reach is TV's single most important selling point. Is that correct?
I think it's part of it, isn't it? It's not. I think we all know. I mean, anyone who's read the the marketing bibles, you know, Burnett Field, Bar and Sharp, reach is pretty fundamental when it comes to driving advertising.
Yeah.
I think I talk about it being it's more than just the reach. It's the actual quality of the reach that you're achieving. So it's about the big screen. It's about the shared environment. It's about watching an ad all the way through. It's about sound. And it's the conversation that TV advertising can create. So it's a combination of factors, but reach is a fundamental part of TV.
Absolutely.
Yeah. But
I agree with that.
I mean, reach is you can't get away from the fact that reach is being undermined for advertisers as a proposition at the moment. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yeah.
For linear.
For linear.
If you're looking across linear and broadcast VOD, there is I think for younger audiences, in terms of the impact that we've seen of the likes of subscription VOD, which has taken viewing, which has changed the price to TV, I think we're not going to be back to where we were at the peak part of TV in 2013. But I think by combining linear and broadcast VOD, we're going to be getting pretty close to where we were before.
Okay, but then you have, we had Apple TV yesterday, so we had another SVOD thing. We've got BritBox coming along. How is that? That is further undermining the reach argument, isn't it? You're taking viewers out of the advertising equation with every SVOD proposition that there is, removes viewers from because there is a point at which they can't watch any more TV, basically.
Yeah.
So how do you deal with that?
How do you deal with
that? Well, you're representing advertisers, you're advising advertisers, you're head of solutions.
There is, Laura got me. Absolutely, it's got to be. This is the point that we're making to advertisers: is one, you absolutely need to know how things work. So the measurement of ROI, the measurement of profitability, what is contributing to what, is really, really critical. And it's not getting any less critical now. In fact, it's getting far more critical. It needs measuring very, very regularly. It's entirely predictable that TV historically has been the bedrock of your schedule because it pays back. I think as time goes by, this is going to be a much more complicated jigsaw. A brand, two brands within the same company will need two different playbooks in terms of how they advertise, because the art of media planning, and this is, thank God that I don't have to do it, but Claire does, the art of media planning is going to get very much more difficult with working all this stuff out. And which is why when we talk about in-housing, which is not really the point here, but when we talk about in-housing, that is going to need an awful lot of skill sets that currently reside within agencies.
So, Claire, to what extent is your progress or your ability to plan then held back by the as yet less than comprehensive measurement of BVOD? You presumably you're going a little bit in the dark there. And then if you're going to the platforms, for example, they're walled garden approaches, so you're unable to really do like-for-like measurements.
Yeah.
How much is that holding you back?
I mean, I come from a pure comms planning background, so if you would speak to an AV planner, you'd probably get a slightly sharper response to that question. In terms of planning overall, actually, it's never been more an exciting time to be a planner, and the wealth, how you can now change the way even an AV schedule is thought about and bought is so different to how it was. It used to be a fairly kind of standardized, we're going to build cover, we're going to build it quickly, that's what TV does. We had an example on a Christmas campaign where you traditionally have a 2-week, come off for 6 weeks and then go on for 2 weeks. We actually bought that campaign over a 7-week period, and we were almost acting like a digital and performance advertiser within an AV environment. So that's what, when I was talking about the shift of thinking that needs to occur to actually still take advantage of what TV is great at, but maybe the way you think and plan it is very, very different.
So you were tactical in that, during that always on period?
Yes, tactical. So based on insight around when people were buying certain products and when they're in the mood and the mindset for those types of things. So it was a very different model and different way. Now, in that instance, you could argue that it doesn't matter what a graph tells you about the reach of TV, because we still achieved and managed that coverage and that reach and that frequency over a period, but it was just a very different period to the way that you may traditionally think about TV, which is a 2 or 3 week slog. So I think, to me, that's where the conversation as a planner is different. The point about the measurement of it and the trading of it, then I think that's a much more difficult conversation to have, because clients are asking you know, why is a campaign last year costing me 150 grand more this year, and I'm not getting any more for it, and that's quite a difficult conversation to have.
So by the trading, you mean the money side?
The money side of it,
so,
you know, and you've got squeezed budgets on client sides, and they're being asked to report on absolutely everything they spend, and they go into their CFOs or their bosses and going, yeah, that campaign is costing more, and that for me is what is putting pressure on the reach argument or the scale of TV. It's the cost of it, and people are asking, well, are we at an inflection point where that cost is not delivering as much as it should or could be, and are there other options?
So, I mean, Matt, so Claire's saying there are ways around this problem, but it costs more.
Yes.
And well, I didn't ask Claire this, but effectiveness as well, or ROI?
It doesn't cost more, it's just a different way of planning. We spent the same budget, it was just a different way of planning.
Right, okay.
It doesn't have to cost more.
Yeah, so I mean, I think, you know, Claire's up front, and this is something that Ebiquity talked about in the report, was that, you know, it's not about disinvesting in TV, it's about changing the way you think about how you plan, rather than do one big burst, perhaps cut it up and look at using sort of different bursts over time. And in terms of the rising price of TV, absolutely, we are seeing that TV is inflating. But we would sort of draw the attention, which is a hard pill to swallow, but to the fact that TV price deflated for years and years and years throughout the whole digital switchover period as impacts flooded into the market. I didn't hear the advertisers complaining too much then. And it's, you know,
I'll bring you with me, Matt.
Good luck with selling that one.
No, like I said, it's a hard pill to swallow. But the reality, I think it's a fascinating market, isn't it, the way that TV is traded, especially in the UK, the whole sort of supply-demand basis of it. It's been built for a number of reasons. It's partly down to the way TV's sort of regulated, the way ITV is regulated in what they can trade and what they can charge. But coming back to Simon's point, that TV has a 40% effectiveness advantage over other channels. It has room to become more expensive before it stops driving effectiveness.
Simon, I mean, what are your clients at Ebiquity saying to you about that, the narrowing of the ROI advantage?
Well, we've got no current proof that it is narrowing, because what TV hasn't yet lost, though we can see that happening over time, is what you might call the economic audience. So 45 to 54s, ABC ones, where there's an awful lot of disposable income. So, I mean, there was a brilliant point made earlier about, you know, a 16-year-old and a 34-year-old, two different people. In fact, the only thing they've got in common is they've not got much disposable income. But as TV starts to lose the more economic ones, that's where we'll see ROI come under pressure. So, to go back to the original point, we're saying to clients, now is not the time to panic. Now is the time to think, because, as Matt says, there's plenty of leeway to be for TV to be eroded, but it is being eroded. So let's plan for it.
Okay, Claire, at MGOMD, you told me this. You've developed some new ways of measuring the impact of TV.
Yeah.
I think it was with Love Island, for example.
Yeah.
Can you
sure.
just talk us through that?
So we're playing around with a concept at the moment, sort of which we're called a sort of a power rating. So rather than looking at ratings, like I said, just based on coverage and the number of impacts and the amount of reach, is actually building a factor into that. Now that factor may change depending on your client and your campaign. So that factor could be around context, it could be around how it drives business. An example that we used was we were building a TV schedule for a client, and rather than looking at the program just based on coverage and TVRs, we actually looked at the social weighting of each of those programs, so the amount of social coverage that program generated. So we looked at social mentions, we looked at Twitter, and we gave that program then a factor based on that. So actually what we did is we created a schedule not just based out of coverage, but based out of what was important to that client, which was actually also about the social kind of ripple effect of that program as well, because that's the type of programming that they wanted to be in. And we're doing a similar model around context, so the emotion of programming and the factor that can play in terms of effectiveness. And then you can also do it based on sort of business as well, which we've got an example of. So again, it's about having that agility of thinking around TV and starting to build an argument that's probably more reflective of the landscape that we're in versus maybe the way things have traditionally been done or thought about or bought, and not letting sort of buying audiences.
In that example, you would be going, I mean, if you're talked about TV, water cooler TV, you would be going for much more premium TV.
In some instances,
yes.
in some instances not. It depends which factor you put on it.
Yeah. Simon, I mean, what are you seeing in terms of the way advertisers are adapting their use of TV?
Well, as we said,
in response to
so certainly changing channel mixes and usage to try and get more juice out of, to mitigate the inflation. They're looking, as Claire said, they're looking for certain environments as well. They're being more conscious of I want to be in Love Island, I want to be in etc. X, Y, and Z. So they're being more selective.
Yeah.
But alongside that, you have to take the fragmentation of TV into account. There's now an awful lot more ad minutes out there for them to choose from. I think that's gone up by about 50% in 5 years, and the sheer number of minutes of advertising that has been transmitted. So we're seeing a sort of slow shift towards more selectivity, I think.
Yeah. Okay, I mean, Matt, what are the other developments in TV that you see coming along? I know we had Addressable talked about earlier, that you think could or will help future-proof TV for advertisers. I mean, is Addressable?
Yeah, I mean,
it's not the answer, is it?
Well,
an answer.
I think it will be part of the answer, and I think it's interesting. Everyone talks about Addressable from the potential of it to be, highly targeted audience buying, to be more efficient with advertising campaign. I think probably for me one of the most exciting potential advances from addressable advertising would be the ability to drive cost-effective reach.
He's wincing there.
Well, let me explain. I think so we've got Virgin, who have now done a deal with Sky, who are going to be taken out of Spark. So we're getting to a more scalable solution. YouView are sitting on potentially launching a new addressable solution soon. The broadcasters are in conversations. They're talking about opportunities for using each other's technology to build a better environment for advertisers as a whole. And the reality is, while we're seeing the amount of viewing time to TV decline, we're not seeing people stop watching TV altogether. So it is still possible to drive reach, but it's about being able to make sure that the right people, the right advertisers, are able to hit the most valuable people in the right way, and Addressable is potentially a solution towards that.
Simon, you winced. Was that because of the...
Well, that's a critical point, because as Binet and Field said, reach trumps targeting, and that is one of TV's great strengths. So if this can be done at scale, if this really genuinely can be done at scale so that we're hitting 60-70% of our target audience, plus a load of other overheard audiences as well, then the ROI equation will work in our favour.
Even with the high cost of addressing?
It ought to be.
Yeah, because it's about that reach curve. It's about cost-effective reach, and the cost of going from 60 to 61% reach, the average sort of in terms of I guess the wastage you get through hitting the same people again through linear TV gets to a point where it gets 10 times, 15 times as much as that first percent. So you can charge higher cost per thousands and still achieve the same marketing goal.
Claire, are you using Addressable to solve some of these issues, or is it?
Some, yeah. I mean, Addressable, as anyone who knows who works in this environment, is fairly piecemeal. It's a very, very small percentage of the overall budget that you spend on TV. But however, when we have done it, so we did it for a recent fashion brand where people talked a lot about live ramp and onboarding and today, but in the purest sense, what we did is we took our customers' data set and we squared it with the Sky panel, created a merge panel, and what that just allowed us to do is essentially advertise to people based on how much money they'd spent, what their frequency of spend was, what sort of customer they were to our client, and then actually allowed us to build the campaign around that audience and that data. the uplift in business was significant. Interestingly, though, this is a small to medium advertiser, and I think again there's a difference here between types of advertisers. So some advertisers that coverage and that mass coverage will be the most cost effective and will remain because of that's their objectives. But for other clients, that more long tail, mid and short, sort of lower end of the funnel, then actually it offers an avenue to TV and a very cost effective avenue to TV, and one that can be measured to drive business results. So in that instance, I think the landscape will change in your favour in the longer term.
I mean, I think it's interesting that your recent report, you noted that you had 870 odd advertisers new or returning to TV in the last year. So presume quite a large proportion of those are these new, smaller, well, they're the large DTC brands, but a lot of smaller ones as well.
Yeah. So I mean, a lot
who aren't necessarily mass market brands.
Yeah, but a big proportion of that are advertisers that are coming on through AdSmart.
Yeah.
So.
Okay. We're really nearly out of time, but so I mean, given all the so last question really, given all the functions, that TV plays for advertisers and its ROI performance, are there actually any viable alternatives to TV at the moment or coming up? So if an advertiser comes to you and say, it's not working for us, Claire, or we don't think it's working for us.
They never say that.
They never say that. Obviously, not with the agency of the year, they wouldn't, would they?
No.
But you say, no, you've got to stick with it, or actually you should put some money there or there.
I don't think anyone's really asking that question, if I'm honest. I think clients are asking, is it still the right thing to do? When we have done some forensic analysis, the answer is yes, it is. There aren't any viable alternatives, as in there's not something that can deliver all the benefits of TV and all the scale and all the emotion and that. However, I think the biggest watch out and the biggest threat is how and we talked about this earlier, how people are able to report back to their businesses on this stuff, and I think that argument will win over any other argument eventually. So I think that's
that piece has still got to improve then. What they can do.
That is
Simon, are you?
I'd agree with that. I think at the moment there is no better home for money than TV as we speak, and that'll probably be the case next year. What we're saying to advertisers is look at this closely and keep looking at it. But if you say anything to the industry, it's make the data available, that advertisers can tell what's working, can measure it, and get confident in it.
Right. Matt, I think I know what your question would be, so I'm not even going to ask you that. But on that note, because we're 1:10 and I do hear the rumbling of stomachs there, I think I've got to bring this to a close. But ladies and gentlemen, will you give my panel a big hand?